Greetings, Temple Beth Shalom. Rabbi Boxt here with my Parshat Hashavua, Parsha of the week. This week, once again, we have two Parshiyot for this week. Parshat Matot, Numbers chapter 30, verse 2 through chapter 32, verse 42. And Masei, Numbers chapter 33, 1 through chapter 36, 13. So let's begin with the outline for the Parshiyot, for Parshat Matot. The first section is internal life of the Israelites, instructions regarding vows and oaths. A man's vows and oaths, a woman's vows and oaths, a woman's vow or oath uttered in her father's house, a married woman's vow or oath, a widow's or a divorced woman's vow or oath, and then further discussion of a married woman's vow or oath. Second section is external relationships, revenge against the Midianites, the war against the Midianites, specific revenge against Midianite women, and the aftermath, the purification rituals, and distribution of the spoils of war. And then the third section is negotiating settlements, provisions for tribal territory east of the Jordan, which we'll focus on in just a few moments. In Parshat Masei, we have the following outline. The first section is remembering the journey from Egypt, the death of Aaron, the journey to Moab, the directives for the future. Section 2 is preparing for the future, setting the boundaries of the promised land, appointing leaders to oversee the land allotment, and building a just infrastructure, cities of refuge, which we'll focus on in a few moments when we start talking about Masei. Section 3 is securing land and limits for Zelophehad's daughters. The problem, land might transfer to another tribe. The solution, heiresses must marry within the tribe. The resolution, the daughters marry within their tribe. And then Section 5 is the conclusion. So let's go back to Section 3 of Matot, provisions for the tribal territory east of the Jordan. This is a very interesting part, at least to me, because I was always taught as a kid that that God told Moses, you can see the promised land, but you can't go in it. And then I was always taught that the borders of the promised land were anywhere the tribes of Israel settled, which brings me to this particular section. Chapter 32, verse 1. The Reubenites and the Gadites owned cattle in very great numbers. Noting that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were a region suitable for cattle, the Gadite and Reubenite leaders came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the chieftains of the community and said, Atarot, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Cheshbon, Eliele, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon. The land that Adonai has conquered for the community of Israel is cattle country, and your servants have cattle. It would be a favor to us, they continued, if this land were given to your servants as a holding. Do not move us across the Jordan. What follows is Moses literally saying to these troops, you are the strongest troops that we have. You are our shock troops. You mean to tell me that you want the rest of us to just go into this land and conquer this land without your help while you stay back here on the other side of the Jordan? And they respond to Moses by saying, no, you misunderstand. We will go with you. We will help you conquer the land of Israel. We will leave our children and women and cattle here. And then when we have defeated all and taken over the land, we will return here to be with our families. And of course, Moses goes to God and asks God, and God agrees. But here's the interesting piece. If this is the land of Israel, and Moses is standing on the mountaintop facing into Israel, but then shock troops are over here from Reubenite and Gadite, and Moses is standing here, then wouldn't Moses also be in the promised land? I'm just saying, it's an interesting theory, interesting thought. Maybe God planned it that way, who knows? But it's a very interesting piece of information in that in Parshat Matot. So let's go to Masei now. And I want to talk to you about the cities of refuge. So if you go to chapter 35, verse 1, you have this beginning of these cities of refuge. And what these cities are cities of refuge. Excuse me. This is a very interesting conversation that I've had recently with a number of people. The commandment, thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill. It's thou shalt not murder. Why is that significant? Well, number one, the Hebrew definition of the word is murder. But kill does not suffice because people die in battle. People die by accident. It's not murder unless there's intent. This is very important. The cities of refuge. Here we go. Adonai spoke to Moses in the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho, saying, instruct the Israelite people to assign out of the holdings apportioned to them towns for the Levites to dwell in. You shall assign to the Levites pasture land around their towns. The towns shall be theirs to dwell in, and the pasture shall be for the cattle they own and all their other beasts, and so on and so forth. The towns that you assign to the Levites, I'm moving on to verse 6, shall comprise the 6 cities of refuge that you are to designate for a male killer to flee to which you shall add 42 towns. Thus the total of the towns that you assign to the Levites shall be 48 towns with their pasture. In assigning towns from the holdings of the Israelites, take more from the larger groups and less from the smaller, so that each assigns towns to the Levites in proportion to the share it receives. And now there's an explanation, moving on to verse 13, about what these cities of refuge are. The towns that you thus assign shall be 6 cities of refuge in all. 3 cities shall be designated beyond the Jordan, and the other 3 shall be designated in the land of Canaan. They shall serve as cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall serve the Israelites and the resident aliens among them for refuge, so that any man who slays a person unintentionally may flee there. Anyone, however, who strikes another with an iron object so that death results is a murderer. The murderer must be put to death. And it goes on to say, the cities of refuge are for people who have accidentally, unintentionally killed someone. They did not murder them. Their intent was not to murder someone. And these cities of refuge are far from where they currently are, so that if a family member or a loved one of the person that was killed gets angry, instead of being able to take revenge on that person has a chance to go to the city of refuge and be there until a time that they can come back and they can be handled lawfully without any revenge. So remember, murder is about intent. And that's what the cities of refuge are there to provide for people who have accidentally been killed, who have killed others, not those who have murdered. Very important distinction for us to understand. That is the end of Parashat Masei, and with the end of Parashat Masei, we come to the end of the book of Numbers. So we say Chazak, Chazak, Venit Chazek. May you go be strong, may we be strong, and may we be strengthened. Shabbat Shalom.